Warning, this podcast is intended for consenting adults. We're talking about all things non-monogamy, which means some of our conversations are going to get down and dirty. Please know we are not professionals, and these are strictly our views and opinions and in no way represent the opinions of our employers. We respect others' opinions as we know everyone in the world of non-monogamy does it differently. Hope you enjoy.
Hey everybody, welcome to another exciting episode of 3 Shades Deeper. I'm your host, Anthony Grayman, and as always, I'm joined by my beautiful wife,
Pinky Grayman,
and my salacious girlfriend,
Ava Moore.
How are you doing, ladies?
Excellent.
Beautiful.
Yes, me too. Kind of feeling good. It's becoming fall. And
There's a little bite in the air.
yes, the burr months are among us, and I actually enjoy this time of year. While I enjoy being out in the sun in the summer and all that other stuff, I kind of look forward to this kind of cooling down and, wearing a hoodie and bonfires, although we did mention bonfires in one of our previous episodes, but now is more the time for that. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
For sure. Pinky, you're going to have to come back to my house. We're going to have another one.
Oh my God, yes.
I'm
And
not
I
invited.
love the ending.
Of course you're invited. That is a
Okay.
given, sir.
I'm just checking.
Okay.
But the other thing about burr months is that it becomes spooky season as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And, spooky season, I don't know, kind of make me think of BDSM. I know it's a stretch.
Black leather and the props,
Yes, because
role playing.
Halloween is, as also being swingers as we are amongst our identity, it is kind of like Christmas for swingers because you get to do all the dress up and all those other
Sure
fun
is.
things.
You can hide and nobody knows.
Exactly. But what we want to talk about on this episode is that, and we've spoken about BDSM quite a few times on the podcast, and sometimes people think BDSM is just this one huge thing of baseball bats and chains and whips, and while all those can be fun, it falls within a spectrum. And we actually have a guest who they decided to come on and kind of help explain what this spectrum is. So without further ado, we'd like to introduce our guest, John.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's our pleasure to have you on. We have Ava to thank for setting this up because you two met at an event. I believe it was a munch.
John hosts a munch
Yes.
locally that I go to,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how we met. And we spoke about the podcast, and they were interested in joining us.
Good. So we're
Yeah.
definitely glad to have you on and to share your experience and expertise. And it's all about putting out information so people can have it because we've spoken before we've recorded, and there are quite a few misconceptions that I think people have within the BDSM world. So hopefully we can touch on a couple of those. But can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we kind of get into the nitty gritty?
Absolutely. My name is John Simons. I am a kink educator, a pro dom, and a life coach focusing on gender, sexual, and romantic minorities. I've also been a part of my local kink scene. I've been just past my 11-year anniversary. I've been teaching for a few years now all over the country.
That's pretty amazing. Thank you so much for coming over.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about these things.
We love talking about them too.
At least two of us enjoy participating. But
Cringe.
maybe, as the title of this episode kind of suggests, Pinky is a participant, but on one end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
On the, for lack of a better term, the lighter end of the spectrum.
Very light.
So, John, can you describe what the spectrum of BDSM is, or how it's
So
seen as a spectrum?
yeah, I definitely want to like make sure that people understand it is seen as a spectrum, but in the end, whatever works for you, and that's great. But people, when we're talking about this, we're talking about quote unquote lighter play, right? Something like sensation play, where you're making really nice sensations of, a feather or even a Württemberg wheel, or just your hands lightly touching, right? And then on the other end of that spectrum are the quote unquote heavier things, like putting nails in someone's breasts or wrapping someone in barbed wire or hitting someone specifically with implements that will cause them to bleed and everything in between.
Yeah,
And
I'll
I
just
think
stay with the feather, okay? Thank you.
and I think people don't think of that lighter side of the spectrum when you say BDSM. People aren't
Yeah,
necessarily thinking feathers. They're thinking a little
right.
more aggressive and intense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know people whose like only thing is they really like giving and receiving tickling. That's their thing.
Mhm.
And so like it really does encompass, kink encompasses this whole array of things that a lot of people can find certain things within that umbrella or under that umbrella that work for them that they enjoy. And when you're on the outside and you see it as whips and chains, that's scary stuff and like fair, right? That's a completely fair point of view. But without understanding that there's a lot more nuance and a lot more under that umbrella than you realize.
So, with that said, and as we're sitting here, we're talking about it, the umbrella is kink, and BDSM just happens to fall under that umbrella. Would that be a fair
Yes, at least
assumption?
how I
And
see it. Yeah, absolutely.
I see it that way too, because not everything that's kinky has anything to do with BDSM as well. So,
Right.
yes, so I think that would be a fair observation. And the biggest thing in the kink world is that I think a lot of people are under the misconception that it isn't wanted, that there isn't choice or consent or negotiating, because some of these activities, which we'll get into a little bit later, can be seen as quite violent, but they're also requested.
I had a conversation one time with somebody
Yeah.
who did not know what I was involved in, and the topic happened to come up, and they said to me, "I don't understand how someone could let themselves be disrespected like that." And it's completely the opposite. There's so much respect that goes into it, and protocol that people just don't understand.
Yeah, respect and consent and negotiations are key to what we do, right? When we are participating in kink, because re- regardless of what we do, there is some non-zero amount of danger, whether it's to mental danger, physical danger, both, right? And so there has to be those things to do them as safe as we can.
Yes.
And I remember seeing someone talk about how they felt like they couldn't turn the love off to do what on the outside looks like these very mean, horrible things with a partner. And when I saw that, I felt a little sad for them, because for me, in my BDSM and kink relationships, doing those things is us sharing our love.
For sure, and I actually had an experience like that. I am a bottom all the way. But one of my partners and I were exploring with wax one night, And I was loving when he was putting wax on me, but then he wanted me to try it on him. And as I poured the wax on him and saw him jumping and wincing and cringing a little bit when it hit his skin, I felt like I was not doing something to him that I should be doing, even though I love it when somebody does it to me.
Yeah. And I will say that is not something that just bottoms who end up topping or switches feel and sometimes struggle with. It was a hurdle I had to overcome of, I was taught to never hurt people unless it was in self-defense. And here I am hurting people on purpose, even though they say they want it. And even though we've negotiated, there's still that mental part of it for me. And so it took a while. It took an amazing class that I went to by a presenter called Sarah Scalper. And yeah, they were great. And that really helped me kind of get over that hurdle.
As you're speaking, there are different frameworks that kind of are in the kink world on how people approach it. You mentioned earlier that there is no kink that is 0% harm free, so to speak, whether it be mental, physical, or a combination of both. And there are a couple of acronyms that are used within the kink world. One of those being SSC, which means safe, sane, and consensual. And even that one is used, but anytime you are going to do something that has the potential to cause harm, the word safe kind of is out of it. The lightest of touch can maybe cause some great injury and you're not sure. So it's still used, but that's one of them. Another one they have, which I think is more accurate, is known as RAC, which is risk aware consensual kink. You know that there is a risk involved in this activity, and you're aware of all of the potential dangers, and everything is done to mitigate them, to lower the risk threshold. And that is done through negotiation and I think good practice, which also brings us another one that's known as PRIC, which is personal responsibility in consensual kink. So all participants have a responsibility kind of to themselves to make sure that they are safe or that they understand what is going on or as safe as possible. So out of those three, which one as an educator do you kind of lean more into?
I lean into rack the most. It's how I play personally. It is how I recommend others do. It's funny that you bring those up. I have a class on negotiation and bring all three of those up. SSC seems to be fading away a bit because what we do is not safe. Who gets to decide what sane is and isn't?
It's subjective.
Right. And consensual is good. So there has been a big shift since I came up to rack, and I really like it. I think that it makes people understand that they have a responsibility to be aware of the risks, and that's on both sides. I think it's important for people to learn what those risks are, regardless of if you are giving or receiving or whatever it may be, and to make sure that the person or people you are playing with are also aware. Like, just because you're aware doesn't mean who you're playing with is aware. So it's important to make sure.
Enthusiastic consent and making sure participants aren't severely impaired, that there's informed type of consent. Like
Absolutely.
I'm going to be, using the knife from the kitchen in our play session. You are aware that they're very sharp and, what's going on. So we all want to be as careful as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, even when Anthony and I first met, I was very enthusiastic to see what kind of toys he had when I found out he was involved in BDSM. But knowing I had never participated in anything like that, we got together several times because he wanted to make sure I knew exactly what I was getting into, and that even though I was showing enthusiasm, that I really meant the enthusiasm that I was showing before he would do anything remotely outside of the box.
Yeah, and that's how to do it. Like, especially when someone is new to BDSM and kink as a whole, um, your brain chemicals aren't what they would be at their baseline. You have what they call frenzy. You hear a lot about sub frenzy, but really it happens to everyone. And you find out about this stuff, and you're very excited, and you want to do it all without actually getting educated on it. And that can put people in precarious positions sometimes. So it's always good to get educated.
I would say that education across the board is one of the things that I found when I first discovered, when he came into my world, my husband, and he told me what he's in it. And got scared first. And then I started to educate myself. And then it's like the whole fog lifted, of 50 Shades of Grey, the book that we don't talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. It was a limitation on my behalf that I did not educate myself on that matter because it was not important at that time before. And then it got important and I educated myself. And now it's like for the first time I've seen them play, Ava and Anthony, I cried because I had compersion. I loved that.
Mm-hmm.
It was just
It's
so beautiful. Yeah. And there's no preconceived ideas of what it is. It just is.
Right. Originally, she thought he was really like hurting me in a bad way. And then seeing us and seeing the enjoyment I was getting and the, power play and, stuff like that, she got a whole new perspective on what it really was.
Not enough to actively participate, but
No.
enough to be a casual observer, which is fine on its own.
And voyeurism is a completely legitimate, kink to have. So if you can get pleasure from watching them, that's still, that is not nothing.
Yeah, I love them both, so it brings me a lot of joy.
Yes. So go ahead, Ava.
Nope, go ahead.
No.
Okay. So we talked about at the beginning how it's a spectrum. We've talked about this before. I have my circle. I have 5 partners, and my partners are very different. One, he works with energy and doesn't even touch me. I have another partner who is into BDSM, and he doesn't do this to me, but he does this with other partners where he uses a waffle iron. So how do we move somebody along the spectrum who starts off with energy and the feather and get them maybe not to the waffle iron, but to open up and explore further up the spectrum, so shall we say?
I think the first question is, do they want to?
Well, if they want to, yes, of course.
Yeah. So I think if someone is looking like, hey, I've started this stuff that's kind of lighter end, but I am, wanting to potentially do other things that are, get a little more intense, let's say. Go to classes. Find classes about the thing. Go to a class about spanking or impact play. Impact play is a very accessible type of pain play. You don't need anything as a top but your body. While you can use implements like paddles and whips and all sorts of fun things that amazing creators come up with, it's certainly not a requirement. And you don't need specialized furniture for it. You don't need a St. Andrew's cross. You don't need a spanking bench.
They do make it more fun.
Go to classes. I don't disagree. I'm just saying it's a good start. You can start with some light spanking and see how you feel about it. But go to a class, learn the areas of the body that are okay to hit, and learn the areas of the body that are safer to hit. Learn the areas of the body that are particularly not good to hit. Go and learn. Like, I am a kink educator for a reason, and one of those reasons is I think that education is so important for Kinksters. If you don't go and learn, then you won't know. Like the amount of times I've gone to a class on something that I'm like, maybe, I don't know. I leave the class, I'm like, fuck yes.
Mhm.
Like, right? And like, if I didn't go to the class, I wouldn't have known if it was something I wanted to do or not. But I was curious enough to learn about it.
Yeah, knowledge is power. I always say that.
So speaking of knowledge, being the educator, a key component of this is the negotiation, being able to communicate what it is that somebody wants, desired, and even doesn't want. How do you present this when you're dealing with a client or a group or a class?
So my negotiation style is long form. My negotiations generally take 2 weeks at minimum, but are usually last about a month. And I go over every possible thing I can think of. But before you get to that, you need to figure out your negotiation style. And very broadly, there are two types of negotiation. There is exclusive negotiation and inclusive negotiation. Exclusive negotiation is basically saying you cannot do A, B, C, or D. Everything else is on the table. Inclusive negotiation is you can only do A, B, C, or D. Nothing else is on the table. I personally prefer inclusive negotiation, as if you are negotiating from the point of exclusive, there will be something that you did not think of or that you thought no one would ever do.
Yep.
That you have consented to it being okay.
Yes.
And it just can cause a lot of issues. I think that when you gain more experience and have a long-standing play connection with someone, whether that's just a play partner, a dom sub, a top bottom, whatever it may be, then you kind of have an idea of what you both do together, and exclusive negotiation can work. I'm just, when you are newer or when you are playing with someone new, I urge people to approach negotiation from an inclusive point of view.
Yes, because I think that's a better place to start, because when you are starting out, somebody says, well, I enjoy being spanking. So let's just have a not exclusive in the negotiation, but this is going to be only a spanking session. We're not going to bring out any other toys or anything. It's just pure impact and actually what you're spanking the person with. So those are some things. And when you spoke about that, when we were away in New Orleans, and we mentioned this a couple episodes ago, we were in a class and it was meeting different people, but you had to say what your boundaries are. And the instructor made it clear that you need to be very specific, because most times people will say, oh, I don't have any boundaries, and says, okay, let me stick my finger up your nose. And you're just like, oh, wait a minute. No, I don't want you to stick your finger up my nose. But that's why sometimes, and a lot of times, people who aren't aware, they kind of say, I don't have any boundaries, do your worst. And then some people who aren't thinking, I've heard stories, aren't thinking, and the person says, okay, I'll do my worst. And it's like, I didn't want that. So I think starting out, as you said, inclusivity, or saying what it is you can do, is a better route to take.
Yeah, 100%. Like if someone says to me, I have no boundaries, and they want to play, I say, great, I'm going to cut off each of your fingers slowly. And they go, whoa. And I go, oh, okay, so you do have boundaries. Let's chat.
Yeah. And I think over time, Anthony and I moved from inclusive at the very beginning. He's like, okay, this is what I have. And this is, do you want to try this? And do you want to try that? And now that we've known each other almost 7 years, it's more exclusive. Like he knows he has a cattle prod that he is not allowed to come anywhere near me with.
Yeah.
Why not? They're so much fun.
Oh, no. No.
I know that they're fun, but we've told the story. But
yes.
And I try to introduce it. And
I was
say,
willing.
yeah, she was
Excited.
willing. And I did it once, and she laughed a laugh that I had never seen or heard. But she was like, the sound was laughter, but the look on her face was like, don't ever do that again.
It was a very strange reaction on my part. And had he not known me so well, he may have taken it the wrong way, in all honesty.
To be clear, also, I was teasing. You should never, you know me, you should never do something you don't want to do. I just really like cattle prods.
They get the
Not
point
a fan.
across.
And that brings me back to the importance of knowing your partner, because I was sitting next to them and I said, "Oh my God, she likes it."
And he was like, absolutely
No,
not.
she
And I
didn't.
was like, "What? She doesn't like it? I thought she loved it." I was confused.
It's something that I've learned. It's that people lie, but your body doesn't.
Nonverbal communication. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people will say one thing, but your body shows a totally different thing. And I just saw from knowing her body, how her body responds to things that she enjoys, that was not
Right.
enjoyable at all. So that was the first and last time that toy was ever even mentioned, besides in telling the
Yeah.
funny stories afterwards. You can always laugh afterwards.
Went to a convention one time and we went with our friends and we did the electric play.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was okay until it was not okay. They actually recorded me and it was just so funny because I was laughing hysterically, like somebody's tickling me. But it
her
was not
body,
it was not good. It was just maybe that's what you were talking about, Ava. That feeling of like, I don't
Yeah,
want
it
to feel
sounds
this.
similar.
I don't want to feel this. This feels in the beginning he had different electricity that he was using.
I just use a violet wand. Forgive me if I'm not well versed in electroplay, but he had like a separate like generator and all this other stuff. Like
He was hardcore.
he was hardcore, and let's just say this made my thing look like a squirt gun compared to the what he brought and was using for his demonstration. And like Pinky said in the beginning, she kind of enjoyed it because it was on a lower, but as he started kind of bringing it up, it was like, okay,
Yeah.
this is not, she found what her limit is.
I would need
Now-
a diaper next time.
Yeah. And like, you tried it and you figured out where your limit is. Like, to me, at least looking back, that seems like a successful, good thing to have happened.
Yeah. Rejection.
She
Right? Like,
rejected
but figuring
electroplay.
out where your boundary is and where that lies is really important.
See, like, I love electroplay. It's just that one thing that I'm like, do not do. So,
Yeah.
like, again, it could be
Mhm.
a mixture of things.
Absolutely. Things in the same like overall category can be very different.
So we're talking about other things. We've been talking about things to kind of keep us safe and make everything consensual. Another aspect of that, which falls into it, is you decide that you want to play. You decide how you want to play. You're playing, but then there is the after, which is kind of known as aftercare, and it looks very different for everybody. And it's also sometimes one of those things that is necessary to discuss and negotiate how aftercare, because after something like that for both parties, it really isn't something that you can just say, okay, I'll see you next Wednesday, and walk away. Sometimes you have to kind of bring yourself down, both being the top and also a responsibility of the top is to make sure that the bottom is taken care of. So, what are your thoughts on aftercare and how it's done and what's necessary for it? Some key things to keep in mind.
So aftercare can be as varied as the amount of people who are in and participating in kink activities. It's different for everyone, but there are some commonalities that I've seen. Softness, like I've seen a lot of people who like to cuddle afterwards, maybe under a very soft blanket. I've seen that pretty regularly. Um, and it is that come down, because when you are in a scene, regardless what side you're on it, your endorphins are going. There are actually other chemicals also in your brain going, but the endorphins are pretty big. And so you're having a crash because you're coming down from that. And it can be an emotionally fraught place. I know for me, from the top side of things, when I do things extra degrading and extra humiliating, I need extra aftercare.
As the top?
Yeah, because tops need aftercare too.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are negotiating, you need to discuss your aftercare, what your aftercare looks like, how that works for you and the other person. There are people who are like, I don't give aftercare. So do you have someone who can give you aftercare after our scene? And that's okay too. It's okay to be like, hey, it's not my thing. I just need to go off on my own for a bit. That's my aftercare, because I've known people like that too. And for me, as long as whoever is saying that can figure out a way for the other person to also get their aftercare needs met, then they can play together. If the other person is like, I really need aftercare with the person I played with, then those two people probably shouldn't play. So yeah, I see a lot of cuddling, but I've seen someone who's like, as a bottom, will go through a very heavy scene and then want to go in the cage under a blanket, like they're sitting up and a blanket just over them for like half an hour. So it really just depends on the person, but make sure to discuss it before the play begins.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for giving that information. Um, a lot of the things that happen in the world or under the umbrella of kink do touch on psychological and emotional issues. Somebody's particular kink is kind of based on something that for some people it's just like, hey, I just like it, but for some other people there is a kind of you want to say deep rooted trauma or event that occurs with it, and it's kind of like a coping mechanism to go through a scene. Can you touch on that?
Yeah. First, I would say that um, very important. Yes, it can be help you through trauma, but kink and BDSM can be therapeutic. They are not therapy. So please don't use it in place of, use it with. Um, I am a sadist, and mental sadism is like at the top. I Fear play is my top kink. I like making people afraid of me. I'm not very imposing, so it can be really fun for me. At the same time, physically harming someone in kink, while possible, is less likely to cause permanent damage when you harm someone, as opposed to mental kink. You are more likely to harm someone for life. It is edge play. It is something you should not do unless you have a lot of experience and education on the things that you are doing. It shouldn't be taken lightly. And if you are doing any sort of mental kink, um, in-depth negotiations specifically around potential triggers, hot words, cold words, um,
Or what are those hot
and
words and cold words? Excuse me.
sorry, yes. So hot words are generally words that work for someone, that get them going, that pull them deeper into subspace, or that get them sexually aroused, or whatever it may be. They're good. These are good words to hear. Like I know people who love the word slut, for let's say. They love being called a slut. It gets them going. It's awesome. Cold words are the opposite. It takes you out of it. They could be potentially harmful. And the same person could love being called slut and hate being called whore, and whore being that word that just sets them off and is really bad for them.
Yeah, visceral
Um,
reaction.
like scene ending words. And so I, discuss those and try to know what those are. And sometimes you don't, and you trip over a cold word, and that's how you find out. And it kind of sucks, right? And then you need probably more aftercare, right? Than was necessarily you need, or maybe a different type of aftercare when something like that happens. Um, but really communicate that, and that goes on both sides because many times bottoms don't just stand there or lay there or sit there silently. So discuss those things with the people that you're playing with. If someone is working through some sort of trauma or history or whatever it may be upfront and honest about the fact that that is something you are doing. Because not everyone is going to want to participate in mental kink in that capacity. But yeah, it is certainly something that requires experience. It requires a more than acquaintance connection with someone, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of the potential harm is so great. When you know someone really well, it helps. When we talk about risk aware, it helps lower the risk. It's again never going to be zero. What we do is not safe, but knowing someone really well helps mitigate the risk to a certain degree when it comes to mental kink.
There's a lot of vulnerability that is present, especially during a scene, and it requires a lot of trust that is, the trust that is there that Ava can attest to. Like, I can only count on one hand the amount of times where, she, used a safe word or and immediately everything came
Right.
to a halt, and it's like, okay, we're
And you
done.
checked
let's
in
let's
and
see what's going on. And we've had, I prefer using the stoplight where it's green, yellow, and
Yes,
red. I think there are only 2 times that we have had any scene where she is just like, red, we're done,
right.
and
but
that was it.
I would say that is a good thing that happened, because a top needs to trust that a bottom will use their safe word when they need to.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And a bottom needs to trust that a top will stop what they're doing when they safe word.
Right. The amount of trust that I have in him is,
Yeah.
unexplainable. Like, because time and
Yeah.
time again, we've gone through these things, and, it's been such an amazing positive experience that we're at the point where, because I trust him, I'm willing to push what I thought were my boundaries even, and
Mm-hmm.
try new things and move along that spectrum more than I would have ever have anticipated.
Yeah, of course, with that level of trust. I know, like me and my submissive have discussed it, that there are certain things that they would only do or have only done specifically with me because we have
Yeah,
built that trust over the years.
same. Yeah.
And that goes both ways. Like some of the things that I do with and to her, um, I wouldn't with other people.
Right. I mean, I get that. And I've said to one of my partners who is a hardcore top, I'm like, aren't you ever afraid of doing something, even though somebody consents to it, and them turning around and being like, oh no, he did something I didn't want him to do, And again, I think that goes into the trust factor of, Anthony knows that's never going to happen on my end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and even with, I've had experiences in the past where, you kind of, when I was dating and a little bit younger, had somebody say, oh, well, I'm kind of into this. And they're kind of like, oh, well, you're this big dom. Why don't you try to control me or do this or that kind of thing? And I think what happens is there are a lot of misconceptions on how this actually works. People don't necessarily
Yes.
understand that, um, even for me, one of the things that I will say, because of kind of people like that, it's like, oh, everybody's like, oh, well, I want you to do this. And they don't understand, like, it's not really something that you pick up and just like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to spank you or beat you or do something right now. Like, no, if that's something you want to do,
Yeah.
we need to sit down and actually have a little bit more of a conversation. I mean, say for
Yeah.
maybe pick up play at an event where you'll meet somebody and there's still the whole procedure goes on. There is a negotiation, there is a discussion, of what
Yeah.
can and can't happen or what have you.
Yeah. Yeah. I have done pickup play in the terms of meeting someone at an event and playing with them at that event once. We negotiated terribly. Thankfully, the scene went just fine. We're good friends today. Um, but yeah, I generally don't do pickup play like that because different people have different definitions of pickup play. But yeah, my negotiations are well in advance of an event. We're going to be chatting for a while. I like to do it in text so I can look back on it, and like I have a huge notes app. Like I have my notes app and I have all the notes, just so many notes before play even begins. And then before play begins, I look at the key things in those notes and confirm them. Like it is so important to me to make sure that we are on the same page so those misunderstandings don't happen.
For practical exploration, tips for beginners, starting with feathers, blindfolds, or light bandages, what would you recommend?
Yeah, a feather is great. Blindfolds are awesome. These things are cheap, easy to find or create. When we're talking about bondage, I would recommend something like cuffs to start with because they have a lower risk than something like rope, which can cause permanent nerve damage. Um, and yeah, it goes back to education because there's a lot of, when you're new, there's a lot of you don't know what you don't know, right? You go and spanking is a thing, right? You're aware of that. You know doms and subs exist. You know that some people have foot fetishes. But there's so much out there that you probably don't know exists. Go to your local, find your local community. You can go to what they call a munch, which is generally a gathering at a vanilla space, usually a restaurant, but sometimes it can be a bar, it can be a game store, it can be wherever it's being held. And that gives you an opportunity to meet people in your community without being in the dungeon and seeing all of this play and seeing someone get beat bloody and that's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
Go to a munch. Look for munches in your area on FetLife. Find people in your local community. Go to the classes that your local community offers. Go to a convention. Conventions, one of the things that's amazing about kink conventions is that you're there for a couple of days and the amount of classes you can take in such a short period of time. Like
Yeah.
you can go to 4 classes a day and still have time to do stuff.
Yeah.
Go to 2 classes Friday, 4 classes Saturday, 2 classes Sunday and go home. And you still had time to play. You still had time to eat. You still had time to relax, maybe buy some things, meet some people, right? And now you've gone to 8 classes and learned about 8 different things. And that's a really great start.
Yeah. Being in community, it's definitely is something.
And you get to
So,
meet interesting people like how Ava met you.
right. Exactly. You never
And how
know
I
who.
met Ava.
Exactly. I have 2 questions. The first one, outside of education, Anthony knows I like rope, right? So but now since we've had a conversation about barbed wire, I'm like, "Ooh, that sounds very interesting." And I've also been very interested in chains since
Uh-huh.
how would he move me from rope to chains or barbed wire outside of education?
Well, some of it, right? Like chains are a little bit different than rope. I don't do a ton of rope, and I don't do a ton of chains. For bondage, I use chains for other things. But think about, if you know about rope, chains are similar, but you can't create tension, so you have to connect them in some way. And I cannot remember the name of it. There's a connector that you can use to connect things, but a lot of the principles are fairly similar. Um, Barbed wire is a bit different. Barbed wire is different because it can puncture the skin. I recently did my first ever barbed wire impact scene with my submissive. It was really fun, really fulfilling, and extremely draining because of the high level of focus required. Obviously, I'm always focusing on what I'm doing, but the intensity of the focus was a lot more. Um, I only did upper body because I know along the inner thigh is the femoral artery, and the femoral artery can be as close as 0.3 millimeters to the surface of the skin. And so I didn't want to wrap around legs and have to deal with that, or have to deal with wrapping, and as I get to that area, clipping the barbs so it wasn't going into that area. So barbed wire I use as a way to enhance the pain play that I like to do. I don't use it as bondage as of yet because I haven't learned enough. I know you're talking about outside education or beyond education. But yeah, like I have been to a chain bondage class. That's how I learned about the connector thingy that I can't remember the name of. Like you can probably find some things online about chain bondage. Barbed wire would probably be harder to find, but maybe not impossible. I learned about it again from a class, and then chatted with the teacher a bunch, and that helped me learn a lot.
Great.
And experience, right? I understand impact play. I understand blood play and medical play, right, where the skin gets pierced. And so when I use that knowledge I have from my experience over my decade plus, that also informs how I approach these things.
Great. So, as an educator, what do you find exciting about teaching others about BDSM?
Oh man, so much. One thing that, well, two things I really like. A lot of things I really, but the top two. One is the questions, because I can't think of whatever I'm teaching from every point of view. It's impossible. Even if I try to cover all of the points of view, we are all unique. We all have our own unique lives and life experiences that bring us to our point of view on that day in that class. And so getting questions are almost always really thoughtful. And some of them are really insightful and things I haven't thought of before, which helps me as an educator get better and helps the class learn. So I love questions, even questions I've heard before, because other people in that class might not have heard it, might have had the same question, but were too socially awkward or timid, or for whatever reason didn't want to ask in that moment.
They thought it was a stupid question, and there's
Right.
really no such thing
They
as
were embarrassed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. There is no such thing as a stupid question. At the beginning of all of my classes, me and my submissive, who is also my co-presenter, we are very clear that we like and encourage questions. And then the second thing is when I am teaching a class on a practical skill, like medical stapling or grappling for kink, at the ends of those class, actually, the grappling one also sometimes in the middle, but at various points in that class, in those classes, in my creative sadism class, the audience has the opportunity to try some things they've learned, and watching them go off and do the thing is really fulfilling for me. I love watching them do the thing because they're all really excited because they just learned this thing and now they get to do it, and that's really fucking cool.
The first part that you mentioned about the questions, that's something that I enjoy that as well, because the people that I do tend to share this with, like I mentioned, it's like, well, even particularly the best example is Pinky. She's like, well, what about this and what about that? And the fact that I can kind of answer some of those questions, and she's seen it and kind of knows what's going on. Um, she's come a long way from where we started to where we are now. And that is a beautiful thing.
Knowledge. Otherwise, without knowledge, where we would be, if we're not really strive for more
Right.
and learning and educating. And that's the whole idea of having the podcast that we have here now is bring people together and debunk this theories, that's myths, that kink is all about pain and like I don't know how to say it. Like
There are
it's
many
just,
aspects of it.
but a lot of it for me at the beginning when I first discovered it, when I first was introduced through movies and whatever, it was all like, oh my God, no, this is inhumane. That's not what it is.
Right.
It's so much more in there. And to debunk this myth right now, like having this conversation with somebody who's been doing it for so many years, and you also, hubby, you've been doing it for so many years, combining forces and bringing that into the world and like sharing that knowledge. Knowledge is power.
Yes, it is. And we're hoping that we are
Couldn't agree more.
providing information to our listeners, because that's why we do these conversations and bring some of our guests on that give a different perspective from us, but also to generate more questions, because there is somebody out there that is probably listening to this right now that has been thinking about it for a while and is looking to take that first step into the world of kink. And it would be nice and fulfilling to know that we somehow helped them take that first step on a journey.
Yeah. Yeah, it's most of the classes I currently teach are at the 101 level, and so it is people who are generally newer. And being able to be just the tiniest speck of a part on the beginning of their journey is really special.
So, as someone who's been in this for a while, have you seen it evolve and change over time and becoming more accepted potentially in the future?
Yes and no. I've seen the scene itself internally shift in a positive way. Um, Externally, people are more aware of kink. Younger people, the generation below me and below them, um, are more aware that these things exist. And I think overall that's a good thing. Um, but it also means that more people have incorrect assumptions and misconceptions because they know it exists, but then they only know some of the misconceptions.
Well, that's
So we're
what we
not
hear.
But I think overall, like, more visibility and people just knowing it exists is probably better. Like, there's certainly in the younger generations less stigma surrounding BDSM and kink, and I think that is a positive. Um, Overall, they know about it, so it's not this dark, scary secret that only bad people do.
And it is, I think the big thing is the stigma um, around it, where it's not looked on as something necessarily bad. And I think one of the first mainstream ones was the movie that we don't mention on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a show that I was watching for the first season, or actually the entire run of the show, called Billions. There was for the first, I think, one or two seasons, there was a heavy BDSM Dom subplot, between major characters that was introduced and played on out through the entire course of the series. And it was a very popular series, so people watching it and seeing it, it's like, okay, you know, this happens. It's out there, and they're aware of it, and it's, as Pinky always says, kind of normalization through exposure. So people see it
Yes.
on television or movies, and they're kind of like, okay, it's a thing. It's not my thing, but I know it's a thing out there.
Yeah, I think it's a process, because there has been more, in the last 15 years, I'll say, or so, more in the media, right? Especially visual media like TV and movies. There's definitely been more stories or moments or whatnot that have BDSM and kink involved. Unfortunately, they're usually not great representations, but
Right.
that's a start. It is a process, and it is a long process before it becomes more accurate. There's a Korean film, I think it's still on Netflix, called Love and Leashes, if I remember correctly. And it's probably the best representation that I've seen. I haven't seen Billions, so I don't know. The only thing I know about Billions is I think The Rock was in it at some point. But I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure if The Rock was in there, but I
Um,
know it was like a Showtime
yeah,
series, and I caught it after it ended and kind of binged it over the course of a few months.
gotcha. Very cool. So yeah, but like it started like you'd see an episode of Law and Order, and it was, a deep dark secret, this bad thing. They would go to a club, and it would be, to check it out undercover, and it'd be pitch black and you could barely see. And I'm like, this is not safe. This is not how this looks, you know?
Right. Yeah, I think it's
So,
very much misrepresented.
but it's a start, and it can, like, at least it's being shown and it can improve.
And
And my hope is that it
it
does.
has been improving
Yeah.
slightly, but the bigger concern of mine is where, like you said, people go into the areas where there's dark and you can't really communicate with anybody. There's no consent. It's like, it's scary. Like,
Yeah,
wow,
uh,
I didn't even know
100%
about
agree.
that.
And there are some places where you can go and partake in these activities that I would call a venue, as opposed to a community. A venue is there to take your money and give you a space to beat people up, or beat each other up, or do whatever you like to do, right? But their focus is business.
Yeah.
A community will usually have a space where you can play, but their focus, if they, in my opinion, if they are any uh, solid community, their focus is on education and making sure people are playing as safely as possible, helping people who are new, keeping an eye on people. They have dungeon monitors, they have incident response team, they have everything that's necessary to run, to follow risk-aware consensual kink.
This is so important, for people to continue doing what they want to do. Like, we all have fantasies. Like, when I was a kid, I had like orgies in my head. I've never lived through one yet, but we all have fantasies, and some of us wanted to implement that, move that thread from fantasy into reality. And how can you do that? And that time when I first met you, I always felt like I'm all alone and trying to explore this ethical non-monogamy world of, like, so deep dive in and through the books and podcasts, but I felt really lonely. And now, like, doing this thing and learning about that and meeting people and going to conventions and being a part of the community, it is just such a different world. It's night and day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, 100%. Like, when I was 19, I worked at this actually really nice upscale adult store. And I was their BDSM expert, having never gone to a party. I'm just a sex nerd, so I read a lot about it and knew a lot intellectually, and so I could talk to customers. But that is so, so, so much different than entering your local community.
Couple of key takeaways, because we've been talking for a little bit, and
Yeah, for a bit.
we try to keep this around an hour or so. But
Yeah.
key takeaways is that I think from talking about this, just like any other activity, the goal of it is to create connection and enhance connections. I think that is one of the major things. I've sometimes joked with a few of my vanilla friends that this non-monogamous lifestyle is no different than being part of a bowling league, because it's the same
Yeah.
concept. You all are getting together around a activity or a subject that you enjoy. You have certain clothes or certain outfits or certain ways that you behave, and there's certain rules and all of that. So I think that's one of the things that after listening to this, I hope that the listeners will get. The other big one, which probably should be the first one, is consent being paramount. Like, you can think about it, and like you said, you were 19 years old and you read all of the books, but it wasn't until somebody allowed you to explore, and besides any other self-exploration that may or may not have happened, it wasn't until somebody gave the consent where you could actually take that book knowledge and make it become practical.
Yeah, absolutely. Consent is key. It is number one, and I will always push for more and more education as well. But yeah, consent is key. Like, number one.
And I think if there's a third thing to talk about, that the entire kink world is kind of a spectrum. There are so many different things that you can do. Your kink does not have to match the kink of the next person to say that, oh, well, you're not really that. And that's something that can sometimes happen in some communities. I don't know if you've experienced that, but you'll have, there are always cliques in any community. And well, if you're not in a barbed wire clique, like, what are you even doing here? Like, really? Do you even lift, bro? Come on. So
I don't.
All right.
I use barbed wire in my kink, but I don't lift.
All right. So, any other question, ladies? Ava, do you have any other questions for John before we kind of wrap this up?
I don't think so, but thank you so much for joining us and, talking about this topic that I enjoy so much. So much.
Yeah.
And Pinky?
Thank you.
Thank you
for
so
having
much for coming over and talking about subject that I'm curious, but have limitations on
me.
it.
Yeah,
Which is totally fine.
I love talking about this stuff, which is another reason I like being an educator, because I can't shut the heck up. So may as well do something productive with that.
Which you have.
Yeah,
That's
I
amazing.
love talking about kink.
That's good.
I really do. So I'm glad. I'm so happy you had me on to chat about it with you guys.
Yeah. So if more people, if there's anybody who wants to hear you speak more about this subject, can you please share with our audience how they can do so? Where can they find you?
Yeah. You folks, you can find me on FetLife, fetlife.com/Johnny Ace, JONNYACE. You can also check out my website. It's GSRMcoaching.com. Gender, sexual, and romantic minority coaching is what I do. And if you mention that you heard me here on this podcast, you will get a 10% discount on a set of 5 sessions.
Okay, so
Awesome.
Thank you very much. On behalf of our listeners, we thank you for offering that gift. It's definitely appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So until next month's episode, we're going to sign off and say goodbye.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Stay salacious. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to visit our website at 3shadesofgrey.com. That's the number 3shadesofgrey.com, and sign up for updates, exclusive content, and more. Want to keep this vibe going? Follow us on our socials at 3_shadesgray, at avamore_3shades, and don't forget to check out Pinky and her salacious, soul-stirring poems over at Polly_poet. Until next time, stay salacious.